Fun time. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. I call to order this meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee on Thursday, April 4th at 6:30 in Conference Room B. Our first order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? Are there any modifications or alterations the members would like to request to the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Michael motions. Is there a second?
Second.
And Wendy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? And it's approved. Now, last meeting, because it was about transportation, we skipped approving the minutes. I know, in fact, as I wrote here, we would be approving the minutes for both the 7th and the 21st. I don't think we actually had minutes from the 21st, which was
not.
Transportation Committee. So this is then for the approval of the minutes for the 7th. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
Yes.
I know I did. I didn't see any modifications. Did anyone else? And a motion to approve the minutes from the 7th.
So moved.
All right. Allison motions. Is there a second?
Second.
Michael seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now, our old business, the Transportation Committee, we discussed rescheduling at the last meeting. I know that I got a message from Erica saying she wasn't going to make this meeting, but that she was planning in the next few days, I think is what the contents of her email said, of putting out the message and all the coalition of data. I think that's improperly termed, but that'll have to do, that she's working on.
How many people showed up? One. Melissa was it.
Which, I'd like to comment, is one more than none. So I am mildly proud.
So what's the next steps then?
We decided to reschedule. We are taking a more mandatory approach, which is to say that we're going to revise the language that we used, issue it out again, and make it sound as if it's an essential commitment from these members that need to be here. We took that approach mostly because the one person that did show up said the reason she came was because she thought she had to come. And so we're modifying the language to show how essential it is to be here. Pushing forward, we're also going to go through the process of trying to contact each individual personally as part of that. And we're waiting for the new verbiage to come out in the next few days from Erica. We rescheduled till, do you remember the date we were scheduled to?
I think it was April 21st.
Yeah, I think it was the next meeting.
April 21st.
And the purpose of the meeting really is to get all of these folks' opinion on transportation issues in the city. Is that the purpose?
I see it as kind of like cell butting. I know, it's weird, huh? Great analogy. Or horrible, depends on how this works. Basically, we're bringing these people in to start talking about this in the hope that they can kind of get this rolling and we can kind of cell divide.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Right, and I think I personally felt that we needed, because I think the other thing that I heard Melissa say was that she needed to know, like, not the marching orders, because we're not going to define that, but the purpose, a vision. And so I was thinking that we should lift some kind of vision for the Transportation Committee from this plan, and that was something that Erica was going to be working on.
That's right.
Because I feel like it's really hard, like I personally don't like to come out to something if I'm not clear about what I'm going to be doing or being asked to do.
Yep.
So
that's a very good point.
Right.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That was brought up at the last
Right.
meeting, also mentioned by the guest we had. And we talked about going to the section in transportation that was in the book, to the items we had in the back, and just including that in the email we send as the list of goals and objectives that they wanted to go after, right?
yeah.
But some of the stuff may have already been done. So I don't know if you want to review the transportation chapter first before maybe...
But then they're supposed to be the experts on this, so why not save a step and have them, since we're having these special meetings, why not cover it then?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be hard to get people here if they don't understand maybe what the issues are, the transportation issues, and unless, I don't know, how are you planning to facilitate the meeting, and are you just going to...
What happens is essentially, so far, basically it's a meeting just like this, except we pull everything from the agenda. The only thing that's discussed is transportation. So I mean, really what's being discussed here is we're said, we'll go through all the items that are on the list, and you're saying, hey, narrow that down a little bit, make it easier.
Okay.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
So it's kind of like what you did with the housing partnership, where you have a list that you're basically walking through this list of strategies to help define what's priority?
Yes, well, really, we want their committee to kind of do that.
If they want to be a committee. I mean, I think that's sort of where, I think you gotta you have a challenge here because you're trying to get people to commit to a long-term thing without them understanding what the issues are. And so I think a good first step is having them come here and go through this list, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to create a committee. I think people have to feel like there's a reason for them and there's an issue that at hand that's causing enough concern that they want to be here.
All right.
So
momentum of sorts.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think from what are the transportation issues that we know of here now in the city? I mean, Wendy's very vocal on the PBTA, but there's other transportation besides just transit. So when the plan was being done, we had folks that were really vocal about bike lanes and providing bike lanes. Is that something you want to push forth? Because if so, that's a very specific group of folks. You're not gonna, a general transportation committee is not gonna all have an understanding of bike lanes. And so I don't know. I'm just trying to push you guys a little bit in terms of thinking about the transportation committee themselves. It doesn't make sense to create a committee because the plan says to create a committee. There's got to be a reason and a momentum and a focus for why they need to spend another night out, I guess.
Okay.
So I'm just challenging you to think about that.
Is, for us to pick that sort of thing, I don't want to. Yes.
I think that we've been trying to maintain a balance between not altering what feels like some level of, I think one of the things that came up last week when we were talking about defining a purpose or picking something that becomes the lead thing that brings people together is that we felt like we were putting a fingerprint on a plan that wasn't ours to put a fingerprint on. Because I don't know that we've defined that as our role. I personally think that should be our role, but
to do what?
We have
diversify
to
the master
shape a little bit of. In order to implement something, you do have to define or identify what are the barriers in doing some of these things, and then try to remove them or get people to.
There clearly has to be some flexibility.
Well, and also, I challenge you to think about, yes, it's number one, create a transportation commission staffed by XYZ, and it was on the list of top 25. Right. But the fact is you tried to set something up and one person showed up. So maybe the momentum's not there right now.
I think too that, there are some other factors like the fact that I failed in getting the word out with enough time. I think that the time came up a little faster than we expected, and so I'm not ready to give up on the results yet until we've kind of done this job a little bit more professionally.
Okay.
But I don't need to discount your points. I think they're good points. The people do need a narrower focus.
I think what you do is you bring this list before them, and somebody facilitates it and says, here's what still makes sense from your perspective, from public safety, from DPW.
That's exactly the plan.
And then do sort of that same processing that you've been doing with all of your other chapters.
That's the plan precisely.
Okay, and then from there you can either decide whether they need to be a standing committee that continues to, or maybe there's stuff on here that you can do
See, now that's
just the right. I don't think forcing a committee because it says you need to create a committee makes sense unless the momentum is there to make sense. So you're going to need to have to feel that out, I guess, when you have your working group.
Is part of this something that we should maybe be doing during the working hours? Meeting with fire chief and the police or whatever, because then they would show up.
Yeah, I can't make a meeting at that time, but perhaps one of you could orchestrate that. I'd be open-minded to that if we think that's what the barrier is, then we need to try and work around it.
I think that would be part of it.
You mean just talking to them about?
Or having the meeting during working hours.
Yeah.
Or you can making a phone call during working hours. They don't have to be physically present in front of. It's Bruce McMahon, who's the police chief. I think you shoot him an email and say, hey, this is what we've got going on. Do you have 10 minutes to talk about this?
What would get you there?
Or any of, send them this ahead of time and say, are any of these things on your radar screen right now?
So right now Eric is putting together a new statement that includes this list that we're going to send to all these individuals to try and make it a bit more understandable, which I think is exactly what you're saying. And like I said, we want to follow up by some sort of personal interaction. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, in terms of hosting the meeting at a different time, that's possible.
Right.
I mean, it means that we're going to lose some members of this committee that are at that meeting.
Right.
I just went through the list, and number 5, mitigate traffic impacts resulting from the reconstruction of the Manhan River Bridge. That's done. 11, construct a traffic signal at intersection of 10 and West Street. Done. 18, work with the PVTA to add bike racks to the Nashwanik Express. That's also done.
Good to know.
So.
Got those checked. Okay, so we know what we're going to do there, and we may need to adjust if then on the 21st, after putting out this message, which needs to happen soon, we still don't get people, then I think we absolutely need to change up and try a different strategy. The thing that I have more trouble is we have a lot to accomplish. It doesn't have to be done at once. It could take 5 years for us to get through the whole plan and make real change. It could take longer. I don't know. But I still think,
Welcome to planning.
and this is a personal feeling, the creation of the transportation was a priority. I know that these aren't numbered, but it is something that's important. You find it in a lot of places. And I think that these issues that we're dealing with should really be handled by the Transportation Committee. I'm sure that when we get to the chapter, we'll go through these items too, and we'll probably do it in advance with these people, just like you're saying, and check them off. But it really should be for those group of experts to be the group that we turn to then follow through. I just don't think this group's really qualified for that.
So, but our qualifications are to make it meaningful, right?
And I think by creating a committee, we create the leverage to make that happen. I mean, there's a lot in here, and if implementing can sometimes mean, yes, this committee is going to directly try and solve the problem. But in many cases, I think it also means that we'll find the committee that will solve the problem, or delegate the problem where there's that option. And I think we should always be looking for that, because given the number of things we have to handle, that is going to create a greater opportunity for them to happen in a more reasonable timeline, or perhaps more effectively and professionally. That's just me, though. All right. Is there any more discussion about transportation? In that case, we'll move to the Energy Commission. I have no new information. I haven't been able to find anyone personally that is interested to go on it. Asked a couple of people, my friend Joe, and my friend Noreen. Neither were interested, so I haven't been able to help with that. Do you know if you've gotten any responses?
The only person that I've heard was one person who's sent her information to the mayor. I believe Kurt recruited her, possibly.
She's a
No, this one was a woman then, so it wasn't somebody else then.
Well, somebody else said they sent it into the mayor. And
okay, so there's two then.
How did you do it? And he said he did it the wrong way once and then did it the right way.
Oh, okay.
So
good
So
job.
those two.
Has anyone else found anyone or even mentioned to anyone? It's a hard thing to do. So at this point, as far as I know, we're just waiting. We're trying to find more people, and that may take a while. Just out of curiosity, Jessica, is that still listed as open? I know that Barbara published it, right?
I didn't look at the list that went online. I can go and look. I can also ask the mayor how many people have sent in their information to, and just get a hard number.
Are there specific credentials that are being kind of looked for or something?
For the
Because
energy?
I know. I think if you have an interest in renewable energy, we have a green communities designation that I need assistance in reporting on. So the two folks that have sent in their information work in the field. They're professional, but I think in any board in the city, if you have an interest in it, you just got to be willing to learn.
Right.
So.
All right. The next order of business and new business is our next chapter review. I think we're up to economic development. And thank you very much for being here to help us with that, Jess. Let me see if I can find what page we're talking about. That is 64. So what I like to do is just kind of walk through these again.
The meatiest chapter of the whole plan.
The numbering here seems odd. So I'm going to start our own numbering system. And I'm going to label...
Well, they decided they didn't want to prioritize, that's why. If you look at the note at the top of prioritized strategies, this committee felt very strongly that the way that they organize their chapter, that goal number 1 is their first priority, and that they listed their strategies based on. So they didn't feel the need to renumber. They felt very strongly about that.
Okay.
So these are in their priority order.
So I'm going to give a number that has nothing to do with priority. It merely is our referral number so that we can identify which line item we're talking about. Okay. And I'll label the left-hand column number 1, going down 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. On the other side, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 5, 26, 27, and 28. And let's see if we can get through 15 of these at least today. The number 1 item is establish a citywide design review board comprised of staff and citizens, develop design guidelines for the downtown area, and establish a downtown design overlay district that will prescribe special design standards to be applied to a designated area. Let me read that again.
Do you want me to explain what that is first before I launch into it? Okay. So a lot of communities, they have, in architecturally significant areas of their community, they'll establish a design review board. They don't really necessarily have any regulatory teeth under the Massachusetts laws, but they're an advisory board that can guide development to look a very specific way. Under our Chapter 40R zoning, here, under the 40R program, part of that required zoning is to have design guidelines that actually do have teeth. So if somebody decides to do a 40R development, they have to meet the design guidelines, and if they meet those design guidelines, then their project is permitted through a site plan review process. So it's kind of like a by right. As long as they meet the design, they can do what they want to do.
Got it.
So in a way, we sort of have it. We have design guidelines that are attached to the 40R. This is an overlay district.
Okay.
It's an optional zoning, so if somebody could still go with the underlying zoning if they wanted to. If they wanted to do a 40R project, this is the areas that they could do it, but it's not mandatory. So we kind of have it, but we kind of don't. We have it under the 40R, but like I said, 40R is not mandatory, it's optional, only if a developer wants to go through the program.
So partially implemented.
Whatever category you want to give it.
And it seems like because it applies to the 40R, that kind of gives a standard, but it's not, if I'm understanding what you said correctly, it doesn't apply to everything like the underlying, what's under the overlay. But would it still be used as a guideline then for the planning board or someone else's?
We could. We've sort of talked about it if we needed, but we have 2 zones and each of them have very specific design guidelines attached to those zones. So in terms of developed design guidelines for the downtown area, yeah, we have them, but if somebody wanted to not do a 40R project, we don't have design guidelines.
We don't have them, yeah.
The only way that you can have regulatory teeth with design guidelines is if you have a local historic district, and if you have a local, giving me hairy eyeball, if you have a local historic district, then the municipality has the ability to have design standards because you want the architecture of that historic district to
So when you say
intact.
the only way you have the ability, you mean that we can't really enforce the teeth even if we were to make the rules?
You could have design guidelines that the planning board could use, but they wouldn't have any regulatory teeth to them. You would just say, these are our recommended.
Yep.
And usually when you have a design review board, they're an independent board. They're independent from the planning board, but they provide recommendations. So you usually have an architect, a couple of other designers that can, but then, it can get a little hedgy because it's subjective to some extent. Design is subjective, and so,
I feel like we're trying to put so many different boards / committees together at this point that there's a lot of people already doing this. I mean, you've got the planning board already kind of, looking at these things. You've got the 40R. It seems to me that instead of putting a board
Right,
together...
but the planning board doesn't have design guidelines that they abide by. They have them under the 40R, but, if a project comes before a new project, say there's a new project on, Route 10 on one of the vacant sites, there's no design standards to tell them how we want the project to look in terms of form, scale, site design, that sort of thing. So maybe there's a modification in here where it's not this, but maybe it's developing design guidelines for the planning board so that they could use as guidance.
And is the purpose of this review board to create these guidelines as a one-time job?
No, they're like a standalone.
To review every case that comes before them?
Yeah, like anything that's got architecture attached to them.
How do you all feel? My personal take is I like the idea. I don't think it's a bad idea to have guidelines to lead people, but I like the idea of more of a one-off, design them and then hand them off to the committees that handle it, as opposed to continually review. How do you guys feel?
They're expensive to develop, though, design guidelines. I mean, there would have to be either a municipal appropriation, which is unlikely, or some grant that comes in that would give us $25,000 to design them. Because it's you're putting architectural standards together, so a lot of it is very graphic related. They're often called pattern books. If you go and Google pattern books, you'll see a bunch of stuff pop up, and it will show you roof lines and how do you want the windows set, and do you want canopies, and so it provides. They're very graphic heavy documents.
Okay, so budget is relevant.
So they're expensive.
Where would we find funding for something like that?
I have no idea.
Okay. So partially implemented, moving forward requires an expense. I think that's enough info for that.
Or volunteer labor of the board, right?
Or volunteer.
Because that's hence the board.
Right, you said an architect.
An architect, if you could find a local architect that wanted to donate time to, but I think there's a public process to it. I mean, you don't want somebody just designing standards and not really understanding the community and where the community wants to go in terms of how it looks, shape, feel, form. So
this is under economic development. Isn't this potentially an economic staller? I mean,
some people could say that.
Who's going to come
exactly
build my factory in East Hampton
if I have to
abide by these?
But I would say that it's something you really would want for a downtown area. I don't think you would apply to an industrial zone, or it would be really for Main Street, Union.
And because we have the 40-hour ones already, it seems like it's not such a stretch to just sort of use those.
You could just use the ones that you have, and the board can make a decision. I mean, you could bring it up to the board and say, hey, we have these design guidelines that were established under 40R. Can we as a board agree to use these same standards for other projects as well as a guidance? Not that they're mandatory, but as a guidance. And you have every ability to do that.
Okay.
So that's something you can bring up.
All right. Moving forward, looking at number.
If this is partially implemented, I mean, what existing body would this most likely fall under?
Planning department, planning board. EDIC might be interested in it as well. So.
All right. Allow for peer review at the discretion of the planning board.
I have to go back and see what that actually means.
Peer review.
Peer review. They have a.
Is that?
No, they had a definition section. They were very good. This economic development team. There are the definitions. I think they might be at the end of their chapter. Let's see.
That is the end, so it's got to be back here. Strategy 207.
Here it is, in the appendix, first thing in the appendix.
There it is, yeah. Page 54.
Peer review. Process of subjecting a project or proposal to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field. For example, the planning board may hire a land use consultant to review and comment on site development plans that have been prepared by another land use consultant. Cost of that peer review is built into the cost of the project.
So that's when we feel that we're not educated enough to comment, and we need
Sure, and you can already do
expertise.
that. You can do that now as it is. I mean, I think they're looking at it from a site plan, but if you have a project before the board that you don't feel like you have the expertise in terms of looking at the transportation data, you have every right under a certain section of the law that we've adopted to hire outside consultants at the expense of the applicant. So the applicant pays for them, and you hire a consultant to come in and give you a peer review of the work. It
So we
happened
have
during
it.
Parsons,
so that's done then.
So this is completed, implemented, we'll say, something like that. Okay, moving forward. Implement streetscape improvements such as street trees, benches, wider sidewalks, and lighting to promote the walkability of the downtown area.
Well, this has money attached to it, so this is not anything that's cheap. Street trees, benches, sidewalk, construction, lighting, all cost money, and quite a bit of it. I will say, though, that we did receive we're receiving $10,000 worth of technical assistance from DHCD to look at the Union Street area, and we're going to be kicking off that process next week. And so they'll look at stuff like this in terms of a plan and provide us with a proposed plan of how we might be able to improve Union Street. Some of this stuff's already been done on Cottage Street. There was infrastructure improvements that were
I know they used to have whiskey barrels full of with trees in them that were up on the street, and they've changed it now. The trees are in it, so some of this is definitely already happening.
And this is sort of like an ongoing thing. I mean, if you can't just do it all in one full swoop, it's impossible. So we've done Pleasant Street, we've done Cottage Street, we're now looking at Union Street. You know, it's. I mean, if we wanted to look at it at the downtown, I mean, at the neighborhood level, you know, that's. We get money when we can to do this type of thing, but you can't do it all in one full swoop. It's way too expensive. Okay, it's ongoing funding. Now, when these kinds of things come up, when money comes up, how typically, like for instance, how was the Union Street area decided to be the use of that funding? Because we used the same process on Cottage Street. We got the same grant in 1999 for Cottage Street. We have the consultant reports. As a result of the consultant reports, we applied for grant funding through multiple different things. We've done infrastructure improvements. We purchased the parking lot. We did the facade for the Majestic Theater. We've done things.
So you basically do a spam campaign of grants and what comes in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what my job is. I write grants all day.
Okay. All right.
So when we get a small plan, then we know what sort of the next step is and where we can apply for funding. So we've put a lot of money and effort into Cottage Street, and as a result, we now have a cultural district. So our next focus is now shifting to Union Street and starting to look at that in a very preliminary way to see what improvements need to happen on Union Street in order to make it walkable.
So I'm looking at this from the perspective of our.
I almost got hit by a car.
Oh no!
Tuesdays.
I'm not surprised.
Crossing High Street.
From the perspective of the Mpic, this is ongoing. The grants are going out. It seems to me like this is handled. This is not something that we need to put pressure on or any kind of.
No. So unless you wanted to, if there was ever a need during the grant cycle to get a letter of support from the master plan committee, that would be, I think, something you could do to help.
Moving forward. Number 4, conduct a parking inventory on a biannual basis to assess whether the parking infrastructure is adequate for the downtown business district.
I think this is something that needs to get done.
This is big. Well, I hear people comment about it all the time.
Well, it was, Cottage Street all of a sudden is becoming really difficult to find parking, which I think is fantastic. I love it when you can't find parking. To me, that's a great sign. PVPC could do this, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Their transportation department, we'd have to figure out how we could get the assistance, but I think that we could request it and get a parking inventory. We wouldn't be able to get it on a biannual basis. It would be something that happens. I mean, that's really wonderful that they put biannual in there, but that's
not realistic.
I don't think it's realistic.
How much do you expect something like this might cost?
I don't know. $10,000 maybe?
And you said that this is something you want to do. How do we make sure that it happens?
I think it would probably be on me to contact PVPC and see whether this is something that we can get.
Okay.
So that would be my task to do.
And what kind of timeline before we start asking questions again?
Oh, give me some time.
Are we talking
it's going to depend.
Hours?
I can certainly shoot them an email. The way that their funding structure works is they get federal funds that come down and then they can distribute it annually, but they're on a fiscal year basis, so it depends on whether they have all of the projects that they have that they can afford to do in a certain fiscal year. So I can't tell you. I mean, I could put the request in now and it could be 2 years before it actually gets funded.
Okay.
So I have no idea.
So you'll contact them probably in the next couple months. We'll hear whether it's possible this year, and then after that it's every year we check in again kind of thing.
Sure.
Okay. Does that sound appropriate to everyone?
Well, this says the planning stage.
Planning stage, that's exactly it. Planning stage. Number 5. Maintain the efficiency of local permitting of the local permitting process for adaptive building reuse, and identify an appropriate site for Chapter 43D State Expedited Permitting Priority Development Site consideration. Boy, that was difficult to put forth.
Yeah.
Translation needed.
Okay, so Chapter 43D was a program that was in the state 5 years ago. It still exists, but when they first opened it up, if you identified a site, and it had to be like a shovel-ready site, ready to go, they put it on their websites, they promote it, they try to get somebody to come into your shovel-ready site and redevelop it. The municipality had to make sure that they could get all the local permitting done in 120 days and be done, so that the local permits could be done, things can start happening in 120 days, and development can start happening.
An incentive for development.
As an incentive. And when they first started it, there was money attached to it. So you designated a 43D site, you could get $25,000 and get a consult. You can hire consultants to do a market study on a property and see what it, you can do lots of things with it.
That's a great incentive.
There's no more money. So I think the program, since, that it was at sort of its height, or in the beginning when this plan was drafted, at this point, the program still exists. You can still designate a site as a 43D site. You just don't get any money anymore. So
all you do is get a little extra,
expedited
word promotion.
It has to be, right. And the thing is that at the time, most municipalities would get permits done in 120 days, no problem.
Right.
It's where people got hung up was getting their state permits. If they had to get environmental review, they were getting bogged down in the core habitat locations and things like that. So
this isn't a local expedited, this is the state
This is a state program. State program. So the state was saying, okay, municipalities, you need to be able to permit these sites in 120 days. And most municipalities were like, yeah, we do that anyway. That's not a problem for us.
You need to get...
it's the state permitting that would tie things up. So...
When was the last time you saw someone apply for this?
A while. I think that it could still be something to be explored. I don't want to, it's still a program that exists. We would just have to see what would be the benefit to us now of having a site designated as a 43D site, and what sites are out there that are shovel ready that would be ready to go in 120 days if,
We don't have a whole lot of inventory with that.
Well, we're working on this inventory now. So we've got this mapping that we're doing with a graduate student that we're identifying the vacant properties. I've mentioned this a couple times with the housing. So we're also doing it for economic development. There are sites out there that could be redeveloped. I can think of a handful, but whether to designate them as a 43D site, I don't know. We would have to think about it, and there would have to be outreach with the property owners and make sure that they're comfortable with that. So I think it's something to explore, but I'm not committed that I don't know if it's necessarily the right thing to do anymore.
What it's saying here is maintain the efficiency of the local permitting process. That means make sure, I get out of this, make sure that it's basically 120 days or less. That's happening.
That's already happening.
For me, this is kind of completed.
So it's done.
And completed, but with the 43D thing in there, I'd want to say that it needs to, explore, I don't know what your categories are, but something.
It sounds obsolete.
Completed and obsolete.
Well, why would you put in the effort of filling out
I don't know.
an application process for 43D if it's no benefit?
I don't know if there's no benefit, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, if there's no money for it.
But if there's still some benefit of having as a 43D site, if you've got the state marketing a property for you, that you don't have to put it, if they have international people or nationally known companies coming and looking at this list and saying, oh, here are all these sites that are available for redevelopment. I don't want to, I don't want to say...
It may still happen, and obsolete, I guess, seems like a strong term.
Yeah, but I think it just, a little bit of research to see whether it makes sense, and then make that decision and move on, I guess is...
So can I ask you a question on that note? My assumption of this board is that it's kind of an arm of yours. Not yours, really, but you can't, the planning, the city of East Hampton planning cannot do all this.
That's right.
So we have to help. How could we help with this? I guess I get this information, I'm inspired to do something, but what would we all do?
I think, there's a whole website.
Research it?
Absolutely. I think there's a whole...
So I'm trying to list
There's a whole website on 43D that you could go, you could look at it, you could read what the program still has to offer. You can see what other communities surrounding us have 43D sites and see how long has their site been up there? Has their site been up there for 6 years and nobody's hit it, and nothing's happened? You could call to other municipalities and make some phone calls and say, hey, Agawam, I see that you've got a 43D site. What's happened with it since you've put it on the inventory? What benefit has this program given you? Anything?
So grassroots sleuthing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the same thing that I would do. I'd go to, if it were me, if I had time, I'd go to the website, I'd check it out, I'd look to see what the benefits still are, what's the state still offering. I'd call maybe somebody at the state level and ask them some questions. I'd call surrounding communities that have sites and see what benefit has it given them. And then from there, you could bring it back to me and we could have a conversation about it. This is what I found out. And I could put in my head, okay, these are sites that this could work for, or this doesn't work for us right now. Stick it in a folder, put it in the file, and it's always good to sort of have the information so that if something ever does pop up, you say, hey, remember this program? This might actually fit here. Because sometimes it's just the timing of things, So
I see two results of this. That's a great question. I see that for the maintain efficiency part, that's completed. For the 43D part, that's vet with state. And maybe find a torchbearer.
I would just say vet with state, or look at the websites and call other municipalities who have 43D sites.
Okay.
So talk to the planning staff. Identify yourself as a member of the master plan committee, and
what is this being listed as?
Official position.
I'm putting two different pieces in.
Well, people have asked us, what are we doing? And I have a hard time answering that.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing, I know, but part of this was done, maintain the efficiency. All right. Moving forward, create physical linkages such as walking trails among the city's natural and recreational assets to connect reused buildings and the downtown with outlying neighborhoods and the Route 10 corridor.
We're sort of trying to do this with the open space plan right now. It's currently being updated, and one of the things that the committee has talked about is trying to identify where the linkages are. So it's happening.
So,
can I ask a question? Because this to me connects strongly to one of the recreation ones, which is create trails to connect parts of the rail trail with, like the schools and everything. And so this open space plan, because I actually went to the Manhan Rail Trail Committee and they were like, how can you help us do this? And I was like, I'm not really sure, but so if there's I guess when strategies are connected like this, just kind of make a note of it. Say we could kind of kill two birds with one stone.
I suspect we're going to find a lot of overlap like that.
Right. Well, we're also having the open space committee is holding a public forum. Visioning forum that you should all attend, and I'll have to send you the date. I think it's May 29th, but I don't have my calendar with me right now. But at that, that's when these things come up, where we'll have maps, we'll start looking at things, we'll start pointing out where do we want things to happen. In the back of this plan, there's a sidewalk inventory, and you can see, just looking at the map, where the holes in the network are in terms of sidewalk infrastructure. To be able to take that and lay it over with our trails network, I think you'll even see more gaps. So it's almost like it's a spatial thing where you have to sort of take the two layers and put them together. And we're talking about doing that under the Open Space Committee. So I think if you come to that meeting, you'll start to see where those things are happening. And then from there, when you identify the holes, then you have some concrete project where you can go to the rail trail or work with them and say, here's a break in the system. What can we do to connect from this to this? Right. And then you get the right people in the room to make it happen.
Now, did you say that they're still in the discussion stage or planning stage? Are they actually implementing some of these linkages at this point?
No, they just started meeting.
So it's discussion stage.
Oh, the open space.
The Open Space Committee had their first meeting last week.
Okay. I love that there's a committee on it. So maybe we can also see that with open space.
Who's on the committee?
Who's on the committee? We have a member from the Conservation Commission. I can send you the list if you're interested. We have a member from the Manhan Trail. We have a member from the Pascomic Conservation Trust. We have a member of, that's Planning Board, Historic Commission, and CPA. We have somebody who's just an interested citizen. Who am I missing?
And how did this committee get?
I formed them.
before.
I have this plan that needs to get updated. I cannot apply for recreation grants this summer unless this plan is up to date, and there's a very specific state format that it needs to be in. And we've been doing this plan since the 80s, and it just gets updated every 5 to 7 years. So it's updating an existing plan, but we need to look at the action steps and the goals and what our focus is going to be, because it's really much it's tied very much to the master plan.
Yeah.
But at this point, that's 5 years old. So now we're just looking to see where have things happened, where do we want to push our focuses, that kind of thing. So the committee will be meeting about every 3 weeks between now and the end of June, and then the plan draft should be completed by July. So.
All right.
Okay.
We only have a little bit of time left today, so I'm going to push forward. And this one's a mouthful. Adopt regulations to implement smart growth principles. In other words, reduce land consumption and the preservation of natural resources through measures such as compact building forms, infill development, and moderation in street and parking standards, pedestrian-friendly design, support for alternative transportation options, preservation and enhancement of cultural and historic features, etc., and sustainable development. In other words, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Smart growth strategies include state Chapter 40R districts, while sustainable development techniques include low-impact design.
This was kind of a controversial strategy during the, do you remember, Michael, during the when we were picking the 25, and this is like everything under the sun thrown into one strategy. So it's like, I don't even know what to tell you about this. I almost feel like you can just say ongoing and move on, because it really incorporates absolutely everything in this plan in one strategy. Yeah. It's like, it's everything. But there is the 40R, so you can just say, that's done.
And smart growth.
And smart growth is ongoing. And the low impact design is something I'd love to see happening more, but again, you've got that listed as a separate strategy in another chapter, so I would just sort of...
Ongoing it is.
I would just...
I think that's wise, because we're going to be hitting these things separately.
Yeah.
All right, number 8, develop and maintain adequate affordable housing stock as a means of attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. Such measures may include adopting an inclusionary zoning bylaw and the use of city-owned land for affordable housing.
So, first sentence, ongoing. Second sentence, inclusionary zoning bylaw failed. Third sentence, city is purchasing land for affordable housing. We've got several projects in the works. So,
housing stock.
So I don't know how you want to categorize it, but...
All right.
Isn't this extremely similar
Partially
to one
implemented.
in the housing?
Right, well, that's what I'm saying. But it's from an economic development perspective. So instead of just saying we need affordable housing, this is saying you need it because if you want to keep your workforce in East Hampton, you have to make the housing at a rate that people will be able to stay here. You don't want to...
So once it fails, though, can I just clarify, can it come up again?
Yes, but it has to wait, a certain time period has to wait.
Okay.
Partially implemented. Some of it's done, some of it's not going to be done.
And the inclusionary zoning, we do have it under the multifamily zoning, so there is a requirement for affordable housing with that, but there's not like a overall inclusionary zoning bylaw.
That would include...
It basically, for any subdivision, it would say, if you're going to build 10 units or more, 10% or 1 unit has to be deeded as an affordable project. So, I think it was fairly controversial, and I suspect that the Housing Partnership probably wouldn't want to bring it back at this point.
Okay.
So.
Number 9. Revise local regulations as needed to encourage environmental protection and business growth, such as the Massachusetts Biomap project. It's kind of green, maybe? The green stuff we're doing might cover some of that?
This is about identifying areas where development would occur and kind of protecting that.
I don't know.
Biomap project.
This is the priority habitat, which is kind of related to the biomap, but the biomap is more of a planning tool, and we just got a new version that just came in. It was just updated. But it basically just identifies where the high priority natural habitat areas are and try to focus growth away from those areas.
This is to revise local regulations.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, quite
We
frankly.
encourage environmental protection and business growth in the same, don't tend to go along together very all that well.
Yeah, I'm not exactly.
Sure, yeah. One doesn't want more regulations and the other does, so that's an odd.
Or you're going to limit what you're going to put into place. So.
I wonder if there was like a regulation that someone had in mind on this committee.
Might have been.
Because it feels like that's kind of key.
Environmental protection and business.
I'll bet you this was from more of a business perspective, given that's economic development. And this was a method of saying, look, we need to look at these regulations because they may be driving off potential business, but still somehow protect the environment.
I don't know, I think we would want to follow up with somebody on that. And Jason might be, if Jason was here, he'd be able to answer the question. He was on the Economic Development Committee. So I would wait until Jason comes back.
Vet with Jason/EDIC.
No, I wouldn't talk to the EDIC.
Jason.
They would have no idea.
Okay. I thought you said economic development. I'm sorry.
No, he was on the
Subcommittee
Economic
of the master
Development
plan?
Subcommittee.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. All right, this may, let's see how much time we have here. Oh, we got a little bit left. Number 10, adopt ordinances requiring new buildings to be structurally capable of supporting additional stories. While ordinance should apply citywide, emphasis should be placed on Cottage and Union Streets as well as Main Street from the Rotary to its intersection with Union Street. The primary reason for this strategy is to discourage sprawl.
So I think the way to adopt an ordinance for this would be to increase the height regulations in the downtown area.
What are they now?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and confirm it. And I think it's important that the language in there to be structurally capable, because we don't. You could look at the Union Street shops and you could say, it would be great if we could put a second floor residential on here. But I have no idea whether that building could structurally handle the addition of a second floor. So, I don't know how you would.
I mean, how do you even approach an owner to say, hey, we want you to put another
We've
story?
talked to the owner of Union Street, or I didn't, but my predecessor did. I think he basically said, I don't know if the building can structurally handle it. So, I think it's
The plaza?
yeah. So,
But this looks like, let's say if Union Street Plaza burned down tomorrow and he wanted to rebuild it, to have them rebuild it so that it would be structurally capable of, because this says for new buildings.
Yeah, we'd want to be a bug in the ear of anyone who's developing.
yeah, but that's not an ordinance, that's a building code thing.
Yeah.
Well,
That's not a zoning thing. That would have to be, so you
I think
might,
this is not implemented.
Well, I'm looking at it from the point, if you're going to try to enforce that or put that on somebody, it may make the building economically viable for them either. If you're putting an ordinance, and then they may say, well, I'm not going to build anything, I'll go somewhere else.
I know,
You don't really solve the problem. I don't know if it's...
I think the building codes would say that it would have to, the building codes are pretty strict, is my understanding. And so it might be a question for the building inspector, because he's our expert in the building code, like, can you do this? Is there, is the requirement already that they have to be structurally designed in such a way that...
Well, what you're trying to do is encourage high-rise or three-story buildings or whatever along the corridor.
So you want to vet it with Joe?
Maybe. I don't know. Not me, but...
So not implemented, vet with Joe.
I'm just saying, like, well, Manchester tore down the building and then put up would they maybe have not even put that building up?
Right.
And they could have said, well, we're going to move down Route 10.
So maybe a way to deal with this is to set instead of having like a maximum height requirement, you have a minimum height requirement. So instead of saying you can't build higher than 3 stories, you say you can't build any lower than 2 stories.
2 stories, right.
2 stories.
So you just sort of flip it.
Yep.
So that might be a way, zoning-wise, that you could.
Zone minimum building height.
Yeah, a minimum building height requirement.
I like that.
Would work.
All right, I think we're going to make this number 11 here. Just a second.
Do we have time to make?
Okay. Higher and economic, oh boy.
Done.
Yeah.
Move on.
All right, completed.
That's what Jamie's job partially is.
Excellent.
And Burns as ECA, she definitely is an economic
Yeah.
spin to her job as well.
Conduct outreach efforts.
With you.
What's that?
We're moving it with you. I was in the planning department.
Oh boy.
Conduct outreach efforts within the business community to ensure that the needs of existing enterprises of all sizes are fully addressed. Is that just someone that talks to the business? Isn't that the purpose of the EDIC to
Should be. They're
feedback?
listed as somebody on here.
Yeah.
So I think that's done.
Economic Development Director.
Or I'd say it's ongoing.
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 It's not done,
Yeah.
it's
No, you're right.
ongoing.
Yep. Ongoing. Good point. 13. Identify and cultivate new opportunities for investment in business and economic development and pursue funding opportunities. That's the job of the economic development professional.
Well, Jamie goes to the Regional Economic Development Council meetings once a month. I think that's been really valuable. He's been able to, this whole anaerobic digestion project that we're going to start working on was a result of him attending those regional meetings. So I think this is an ongoing thing.
Agreed. I did a paper once for the mayor when I first started on these committees, pushing for an economic development position to be filled, and gave a very detailed listing of all the kinds of things they do. And what's important about having that job is they'll spend time out in Boston and the other part of the state and even surrounding areas,
Right.
all the way down to New York, trying to find ways in which they can draw businesses in and bring in opportunities. And that's a hard thing to do. You're saying that he's attending these kinds of things.
Well, he's
looking
attending
for
them on
it.
a regional, we're not sending him to New York.
I know.
But you also have to look at it from how much land do we have available for those types of businesses. We're pretty built out. Our industrial zones are, the one on South Main Street is fairly open, but in my personal planning opinion, I'm not sure if that even should be an industrial zone, because I can't imagine trucks wanting to drive through town in order to get down there to do stuff, or come up through Westfield, Southampton, and,
We don't want that.
So, I have questions about that zone, but that's not my decision to make. But the other industrially zoned district off of O'Neill Street area, most of those are filled.
Yep.
We only have, I don't know if there's any vacant properties down there anymore, actually. And if so, there's only one or two. So
And
you have to
Paul's
look at
place.
the cost benefit of, is it worth spending $1,000 to send somebody to New York City to go recruit businesses when we're kind of bullish? Right, we have nowhere to put them. Like if we were like Holyoke and had an entire industrial park that was vacant,
Yeah.
then that seems to make sense. But, we have, most of the mills are filled with mixed use, and that seems to be where our trend is going. We have a bunch of industrial businesses, so I don't know, in terms of sending somebody out, I'm not sure, and that's a decision for the mayor, that's not a decision for me, but they would want to look at what's the cost benefit of spending money to send somebody all over.
I think at the end of the day, what matters is that Jamie's in that position. This is ongoing. All right. One more. Number 14. Attract investments to targeted economic areas by utilizing innovative marketing to emphasize the city's resources. Innovative marketing.
We're trying to do this a little bit with the EDIC. Again, we're trying to map where our vacant and underutilized properties are, and then once we have that list, we're hoping to put together at least, something on our website that lists the properties themselves and more information, so that if somebody was interested in locating to East Hampton, we would have a list of available properties. So, and we're working with and the Chamber has done some work as well, I think, on this on their own, because we've had that discussion with them. So it's kind of bubbling. I wouldn't
So
say it's-
planning stage?
Planning stage, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Can I ask the same question I asked before on this one? Because this one, like, multiple boards or kind of groups in the city are working on it. Like, what would we, as a committee, do to support? Like, if we were like, yes, we want to do this one, how would we start to tackle that?
I think you would want to meet with the EDIC and sit down with them and ask them, what could you do to help them? Whether it's the creation of marketing materials, whether it's,
Okay.
you could, if you wanted to take that task on, finding somebody to develop marketing materials, what would you market? What would the message be?
Right.
What do they want to get out there?
Maybe
So,
local works.
Local works. You know, that's the other group that you would probably want to sit down with and figure out what would make sense in terms of, and there's this now survey that's out that went live today for consumer preference survey, retail survey, so you did it, good. So once we have the data from that survey, we'll be able to have a better understanding of why people are leaving town and what they're purchasing. So if they say there's no place in East Hampton to buy shoes, which there isn't as far as I know, I'm going to Northampton to buy shoes. That's Southampton, that's not East Hampton. So, you know, we need to therefore market to try to get a shoe store here. You know what I mean? So once we know what people want to purchase and why they're not purchasing them here, then we can do some more of that marketing and targeting, but we can't do that until we have like the data to say this is who we should be targeting, because you don't want to just randomly be targeting folks. So.
All right. After that, we have any announcements from anyone? Or reports from any of the old discussions we had prior? In that case, our next meeting is 2 weeks hence, which I believe is what? Is that the 21st? No, what is that? Is it the 18th?
Sounds good.
First to the 18th. And I think is that the meeting? I thought we pushed the meeting further into May for the Transportation Committee. I could have sworn we did.
We said April 21st.
Did we say April 21st?
That sounds like earlier in the week. That's like a Monday or something.
And that's so soon.
Like that.
Isn't that a Sunday?
Yeah, April 21st is a Sunday. That can't be right.
Could that be May 21st?
Yeah, I think we moved it to May 21st. That seems much better to me. So we're having a regular meeting. We'll continue going through the rest of this on the 18th of this month, a normal time. And do we have a motion?